Today at shopdap.com, we're going to be installing a timing chain tensioner on a 2.0t TSI engine. Okay, so before we get into our install on this, first of all, disclaimer, this is going to be something relating to timing of your engine. If you are not super comfortable with this, this is something that could potentially damage your engine if you did it improperly. So this is a very important DIY. If you're not comfortable with this or you're not sure what you're doing, I would suggest to not tackle this. We are doing this at our shop, DAP Repair, which if you want to get this done, we can do this for you, and we will link to our shop in the description below. But again, disclaimer, if you are not comfortable or this is not a job you think that you should be tackling, you can damage your engine if you're doing this. So you have to make sure you do this properly. If you do not, there is some risk of damaging your engine. So with that said, let's get into our install. All right, so the first step we're going to want to do for this process before we start doing anything with the timing chain tensioner, because we're taking the cover off, we are going to have to drain the oil out of the engine. So let's go ahead and crack our drain plug loose and we'll get the oil drained. Okay, so here we are in the engine bay. We're going to start by removing our coolant bottle, and then we have to access our engine mount to loosen that so that we can get the upper end of the timing chain, this cover, removed. We are going to be doing this to make sure we have the engine in time before we're doing this job. This may not be something that's necessarily required, but I would recommend making sure your engine is in time ahead of time, just so that you can know with 100% certainty that if you were to have anything happen along the way and if the engine gets out of time in some way, your chains loosen up, any mistakes happen along the way, you'll be able to fix them if your engine is in time. Otherwise, you're going to be left with a lot of question marks and hoping that you get this thing timed up properly. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, and we have another torque screw back here. Coolant bottle is going to be loose now, and we have to remove our 10 millimeter right here. Okay, so now we're going to remove our bracket here. This is just a brace that holds the engine mount. Now our bracket's out of place here. All right, now we're going to take off this Torx for this noise pipe here. Just give us a little bit of room to work with here, and then there's a 10 millimeter right here. All right, now we're going to take off these spring clamps just so that we can get this out of the way for you. This is really just so that it's easier to see on video. You probably won't really need to do this otherwise. All right, so now we're looking at our motor mount here. We have two bolts here, a 16 here, a 16 here, and then two 18s that hold on here. Now, these 16s basically keep the engine mount from moving on the frame rail itself. They don't hold the engine in the car. So we can take these out without worrying about anything happening. So these bolts are out. And now we actually have to get an engine brace to hold this engine in place, because if we take these other two 18s that are over here out, the engine will fall. So we need to make sure we take those out now, and then we can remove the engine mount completely, which will give us free movement on this side where we access our upper timing cover here. All right, so now we have our coolant bottle out of the way just so we can see everything. We have our engine brace on here. Now you can either engine brace like this and hook on to the engine hook right here, or you can do a floor jack underneath on the oil pan, and that will allow you to support the engine. But for use of being able to show everything on camera when we're up high, we do want to make sure that we have an engine brace on our car, but you can definitely do this on the floor Crack these two loose. Ooh, gotta get some more tension on this thing. So I loosen it, just moving on me. And then we take this out like so, and we are all set. Okay, so one note we wanted to mention, this plug right here is actually meant to give you access to the engine cover, the triple squares, to take that bracket off. This will make your life a lot easier. So all you do is pop this out and you'll have access to those triple squares through here, which again can be a lifesaver from struggling trying to get your triple squares into the area between the frame rail and that bracket. Okay, so here we have in place our engine bracket that we just talked about. It does mount lower down here. We couldn't show you removing this due to the issue of you just can't see all these bolts that we removed. 3 triple square bolts that hold it in place. The lower one being the one that we just discussed that has an access plug. So you will have to get down a little bit lower to get in there, but you will have to do it blind, which is unfortunate, but this is what you will need to remove to get this engine bracket out, and then you'll have to kind of work it around to get it past the engine. Now we're going to be looking at our cam adjuster magnet. This is actually what controls variable valve timing. It has some torque screws that mount it in place. We will need to remove this if you do plan on removing the upper cover for timing the engine and making sure everything's in place. This is something that you will need to remove. So you'll just take out these 3 Torx bolts and then you can remove that magnet. Now we're going to be removing our upper timing cover. You have bolts that surround the perimeter of this, and we're going to start removing those. You can use either a 10 millimeter or a Torx. 10 millimeter is probably going to be easier for most people. And so we're going to go ahead and remove them and then work this cover out. It is not easy to get out, but you can get it out, and this is something that you will need to access to take a look at the upper timing chain section of this. Okay, so now we're going to actually remove the serpentine belt so we can get that out of the way and take a look at our timing stuff. So we're going to remove the serp belt now by putting tension, releasing tension off the tensioner itself, and then it should allow the belt to get out of the way. Okay, so here we are on our crank pulley. We have our fender liner removed here, and we have the serpentine belt removed here, and now we are going to get our engine timed up. So we have marks here on your crank pulley, and if you look, it's going to be this right here on our vehicle. It's not going to be super easy to see, but there's a notch cut out of the pulley. So the timing mark we're looking for is going to be here over in between 3 and 4 o'clock here, and it's on the cover. We'll get a close-up once we get this thing in time so you can see exactly what we're turning for. And once we get that in time, you can see up top here a little bit easier. That's where the timing mark is turning. There is a timing mark up top here. This is not for the crank pulley, and the one we're using for timing this thing is going to be the lower one down here, again, between 3 and 4 o'clock. Okay, so we take a look here. We have our timing mark on the cover and the pulley lined up, and we have our top stuff lined up, so let's go up there and take a look at that. Okay, so on the top here, we have a timing mark here and a timing mark here. Now this one's cut into the gear itself. This one's just a mark on this cam chain adjuster on this gear. You're gonna have these basically pointing in the upwards direction. That's how you know that this is in time as far as in the correct place. Checking the timing to make sure that your chain is not stretched is a process that actually is between measuring the cams. Because we did that with a scan tool, we know that our chain stretch is not outside of limit, so we're good in that circumstance. We'll make sure we link to that video where you can check out the checking of the stretching based on the scan tool. We're going to proceed with the rest of our chain tensioner install. Okay, so we are now going to use our crank counter hold tool to remove our crank pulley. So this actually has these 4 nubs that stick in place. They're going to go in these holes right here in the pulley. So just get in here. Get that in place, and now you can take your socket and you can use to hold with one and then loosen with the other. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Once we get this bolt out, take our pulley out. Now we have the pulley off, we can take our donut tool, slide it onto our bolt, and then thread this back in, and then you're just going to snug it up. And what this does is this keeps this lower timing chain, on the chain gear here, all in place where it's supposed to be, because if you fail to do this, this engine can fall out of time. So this will keep everything in place. We can now take off our lower cover here. Okay, so we have a Torx bolt that's actually behind here that holds this cover on. So we're going to start with the hard one right here. We're going to take this pulley off. Then we're going to put this bolt back in. All right, now we got that bolt in all the way tightened up. You can see once we move this, we can access it. So we are going to loosen like that. Okay, so now we're going to start by taking the rest of our stuff off. We have a bunch up here and then all around the cover. Some of these we're going to need to use a ratchet for because we won't be able to reach it with this, but we're going to get as much out with our electric impact as possible just to save time here. Okay, all of our bolts are out and we are going to start prying a little bit. This is where you really, if you're trying to not replace this cover, you're gonna have a hard time. So you're gonna have to start prying, and oftentimes when you're messing with this, you'll end up bending this. So you could try to maybe take a razor blade and kind of cut around here. You're gonna take a really long time to do that. While this cover is expensive, we pretty much are only gonna be replacing it whenever we're doing this.
There you go.
Ooh. Ooh, it's about to fall. Okay, so we are actually going to remove this turbo outlet, and they are 5mm Allens that hold it in place because this cover is going to be stuck in here otherwise. We've now removed our outlet here from our turbo, and again, those 3 Allens. And you'll also have to loosen this out of the way because there's a hose in the way. There are 4mm Allens that hold the N75 on. So we are going to take our cover out of place so we can get to our timing stuff. All right, so what we're gonna do once you get that off is clean up our mounting surface. You do wanna make sure you clean up all of your mounting surfaces for your cover to ensure you don't have an oil leak after the fact. You do not wanna have to take this stuff back off again, and you definitely don't wanna have to buy another timing cover. So we're just gonna take a razor blade, clean this up, and then once we get the bulk of it off, we're going to use a wire brush to get the rest. All right, we've cleaned up our mounting surfaces and now we're ready to swap our tensioner over. What we're going to do is take this long zip tie, put it through both of these guides here, and we're going to basically pull this together so that all of this will stay tensioned while we swap our chain tensioner out. So we're going to pull this tight, and then we should be good to remove our chain tensioner here. All right, and we're going to take our T30s here. One. All right, put our new tensioner in here. And we'll get these two tightened up and torqued down. So as we snug these up, and your torque spec on them is 9 Newton meters on the tensioner itself. You will want to double check that. And 9 Newton meters is really not much. All right, now we have this all set up so we can pull our clip. And then we're going to walk this clip back. You squeeze it and then slide it back. This will prevent the piston from pushing back in if you were to have an issue where you lost oil pressure or anything of that nature. This would help it prevent it from walking back in. It has these kind of serrated part where it's going to catch. So we can double check to make sure everything's good and everything's tensioned, and then we can cut our zip tie and reassemble. Okay, so here is our timing cover, and we have our RTV. We include this with our kits, and we are going to run a bead all the way around here. You have to obviously make sure it's enough to seal, but not so much that you squish it over, because you don't want all of this stuff squishing over and then falling off inside of your timing chains. So we are going to go ahead and start that process. Now there is a channel in the side of this thing to run your bead on. All right, so we are ready to go back on the vehicle, and we'll just want to wipe it down real quick before we push this on to the engine. All right, here we go with our cover. And you want to remember, you want to try to get this on as cleanly as possible, because you don't want to smear your RTV. Good there. Let's snug up all of our screws. Alright, now we're going to take our crank bolt out with our counterhold guy, and just so you can look here, there is a notch on this gear that lines up right here with those splines, so you should be able to see that in place. It only goes one way, so, and we're going to get that in place. And you can feel it kind of sit exactly where it should, and make sure you do not do what I just did and leave that tool on. And we're going to be installing our new bolt here, and then we'll be torquing it down. One note we wanted to make about this, because of the way these things spline, it's really easy to not have it in time properly. So part of the reason why putting it in time is extremely valuable is because you can make sure that your timing marks line up still, because nothing's moved. And as long as you haven't allowed anything to move in the timing chains, then all of this stuff should still line up, and your timing marks are going to be in place here. Okay, so now we have our counterhold tool, and we have our torque wrench. We're going 150 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. So first we got to do our 150 Newton meters. All right, now we're just going to do a 90-degree turn from here.
Ready?
Yep. Okay, so we'll switch positions here. Okay, so we finished up getting our crank bolt tightened. I feel like anybody who's going to be doing this job can take it from here. You can tighten all of your bolts down, get all the motor mount, all that stuff reinstalled, and then you are finished with updating the tensioner on your TSI engine. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more.